Awesome. So how many people are familiar with the Aragon platform, just with the tech stack at all, or has worked with it before? Anyone? No?
I tried to create organization, play with it, but not know yet.
Okay, cool.
I'm from the startup community. I haven't tried.
Okay, cool. So for the first hour, 45 minutes, I'm just going to give this presentation to just go over everything in the tech stack, and then we'll build this demo app, and we'll try to I'll try to explain how to structure your permission system to make these DAOs a little bit more adaptive. But yeah, as a prerequisite, have Node installed, npm. I can, when we get to that workshop portion, I can walk around and help you guys install the CLI and the package manager. Sorry, not the package manager, the API stuff and all the relative Node packages. But out of the box, there's a template that should get you going. So cool, awesome. I guess I'm just gonna sit since there doesn't seem to be that big of a crowd. All right. So yeah, overview. So these are the 5 main packages for Aragon. We have the OS, which is the set of smart contracts that runs on the Ethereum blockchain. The package manager, which is also a set of contracts. The CLI, which is the tool that you'll use to run your dev chain, run IPFS. Also, you can actually interact with the DAOs themselves. You can configure the permissions. You can launch a DAO from the CLI. The API. I'm not going to go over the JavaScript API, but I will go over the React API itself. And I'll explain sort of what that does, what it takes care of for you, and if you don't like it, where to go to just use a regular wrapper. And then the UI, which is just a design kit to standardize when you build Aragon apps. We have a design philosophy. We want things to kind of feel the same. We want the experiences to feel the same across all our different apps. And so yeah, at a higher level, this is essentially this layer right here, this JS layer right here is where the API comes in. And as you can see, it handles caching, it handles your events. So when your contract emits an event, how you then consume that event and reduce your state. It itself wraps Web3, so you don't need to deal with any of that. You can just make your contract calls through the API library. And a messaging layer. So if you want to send a transaction or send a message, when an event is processed, you can do that through the window. It's and then the EVM. So I'm going to go over the kernel and the ACL. The EVM scripts is essentially the bytecode packed version of calls that you can make to other contracts. There's a registry of those for the package manager, but it's not super important that you need to know how to use it. But if you want to use something like the forwarder, which I'll kind of talk about later, it's really useful. But the ACL is the access control list. Is everyone familiar with that terminology from Linux? So it's exactly the same thing. You can very much view the Aragon stack as a true OS on top of the blockchain, in the sense that every app is sandboxed, and there are roles and entities that manage those roles. So yeah, these are the 3 big components: the kernel, the ACL, and the package management system, which handles upgradability. And so yeah, this is essentially, the kernel is a very lightweight contract. It has a mapping for all the apps installed for a particular DAO. And the way that mapping is traversed is we encode these strings, namely the URL to where this thing lives in the registry. And so yeah, you can, what essentially there is for every app, there's a unique hash, obviously, that gets created. So let's say, as you see here, name hash, right, voting.aragon.pm.eth. When you publish your app, it gets a domain such as this. So You can publish on your dev chain using the open.aragonpm.eth, and that's set up by Aragon themselves. But if you want to publish to the main app, like the main app registry, there's like a process that they kind of audit your contracts because they don't want to let anyone publish because things will get very large. And it has something called the app manager role. And now the app manager role essentially is it is the permission that you set to configure other permissions for your application. So, when you're deploying one of these DAOs, you might pick an address. That address will have the app manager role. It will do all of the pre-configuration steps. And then ideally, you would revoke permissions from that address when you're done configuring your DAO, because this is like the highest level access that any permission has. And so, yeah, these are the two functions that you use the most with the kernel when that's exposed. The namespace, so yeah, you would encode your app name. So let's say it's demo.aragon.pm.eth or whatever. You would encode that. Pass in. Sorry, you would pass in the namespace. So we're going to do open.aragon.pm.eth. The app ID, which we would encode the name. Let's say demo, and then the address of where you're going to deploy it, and then get app. So when you launch an Aragon dev chain, some apps kind of come out of the box. So you have voting, the token manager, and those are the two main ones right now that are live that we'll be looking at. But those you can just access. You'll be able to get that code by just calling get app. So you encode voting. I don't even know how to pronounce that. Kisak? Yeah? Kcheck? Yeah, I've never had to say that word out loud, actually. So yeah, you would encode that, and then you're able to get the app code. So when you publish your app, others will also be able to pull your app down from that unique address. So I kind of lied. The kernel isn't the app itself. There's an app proxy, so we create instances of applications from the code repositories, which I will show later. And essentially, you're pinning a new app, you're pinning an app proxy address to then deploy one of the applications on the Aragon network. So you're not actually referencing the same voting app address right across all apps. You're creating a proxy that has the voting app deployed.
Pinned application is like a proxy?
I'm sorry?
Pinned app, it's proxy?
Oh yeah. Or new app, the app instance function returns the proxy. The new pinned app instance is saying I want to. Yeah, you basically want to pin that name for that particular proxy always. So you're going to. Yeah. So when you want to upgrade, you can technically, if you have the permission set up, you should be able to pass a new address, right, and pin that new address.
So if you want to create application, you have the new app instance, and if you want to upgrade application, you have to call new pinned app.
Yeah, that's true programmatically, like if we were going to write a Solidity contract to upgrade, but I'm going to show you how we can upgrade contracts for the CLI. So it's kind of moot. Because going this route is great when you want to build like a template. So let's say you have many different apps that you want to put in one DAO. You would use this interface, but usually what you can do is that you don't actually need to do this. You can just you can version the different apps in the registry and then pull down a new version from that registry. So yeah, the kernel exposes the ACL. So if we want to upgrade the kernel, this is essentially how you would do it. the thing about upgrading the kernel is anyone, that's very configurable, anyone can do it, but it's a huge security risk. Ideally, you should only upgrade the kernel to approved releases on the package manager. So you can supply your own address and go with that, or use a fork, but it's strongly disencouraged to do this. I'm just showing this saying you can upgrade your kernel if you want to. Okay, so the ACL, I hope I'm not beating a dead horse here. It's just a set of roles that describe who has permissions to execute what action in an Aragon app. And it also describes who can grant and revoke those rules. An entity or an app or an address, an entity, just some abstraction essentially holds all those permissions and describes. An entity. So, for example, when you make a new app, that app itself is an entity, and so it has its own ACL compared to the voting app. And if you want to access roles in other apps, you have to either use a forwarder to then encode that function call with the parameters and then execute it, and that the other app has to be configured, right, to know that address is allowed to do that action. Or you can set up a new unique role to perform that action, because each ACL is sandbox. They don't really talk to each other. They just traverse one another. And so let's just look at the snippet really quick. So we bring in the Aragon app, which has our kernel. So we're going to create a new role for this set receiver function. We're going to expose who's going to be receiving such ETH when you pay this, when you send ETH to the send funds function. And as you can see here, we have a couple things. One, we have only init, which is a decorator that comes with the Aragon app. But then also you see here we have external, letting it know that it's a public function call. Basically what this does is it says, check to see if the address has permission or is this role. And when we go into the template and we actually build our app, we'll see how we can, give permissions to new addresses. And we can even give permissions to any address. So we have a convention where if you do address 0, so address, parentheses 0, so the 0 address, if you set that to one of the roles, it basically means any entity can call this function. So if you wanted to have just, a vending machine, right, and one of the methods anyone can call, that's how you would do it. But this seems pretty concise, right? Does anyone want me to jump into anything in the snippet?
This is an example for any application or just for governance application. I just support for any.
Yeah, this is just this is the base contract for your Aragon app if you were to write a new one.
I try to understand the target of this OS. It's just for marketplace for any applications on Ethereum blockchain, or it's just for Aragon organizations.
Okay, yeah. So it's just for Aragon organization. So other Aragon apps have access to the registry, which when I was showing the architecture, you'll see how this auth decorator plays into why only Aragon apps can kind of use the roles system, and how the package manager knows which apps are which and which roles they have.
Okay, we created the app, and any Aragon organization can use this app.
Exactly.
And what if I will upgrade this app? This app will upgrade for
We'll get there. Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll explain like the versioning and how you can either you can't force everyone to update. So once someone picks a version, so let's say it's 1.0, that's what their app is using, and then you bump your app to 1.01. They can actually, in their application, hold a vote to upgrade to 1.01. But it won't do it automatically. It'll always, right now, the contracts themselves, because then they would have to bump the version of their application when your application updates. So there's it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more work, but that's sort of the workaround with like using IPFS as this layer to deal with versioning. Yeah, so I'll in one of these slides I'll show you. Cool. So it's actually right here. So so this is how we deal with the upgradability. And as you can see, there are two main components. There's the registry, and then the repo itself. So the repo actually contains the code inside. At a certain IPFS hash location, and the registry has the versions and has the versions for each of the apps. So as you can see here, the content changes, right? And you have these different blocks. And at a higher level,
it's a IPFS version there, or this previous slide?
Yeah. So.
Yeah,
so you have the code, the address where it's deployed, and then, the content. And we'll talk about there's this thing called the Era app JSON file, and it describes the roles and kind of describes the directory structure of your project. So at a higher level, this is the architecture for Aragon PM. So when we were talking about the kernel, right, in the ACL, we see here that the registry itself is a DAO, is an Aragon app. And it has permissions and roles, right, to add subdomains to the ENS registrar. Then, right, through the kernel, you're able to, once you have this, once you have this linked, then when you get that name hash, you get that particular kernel for that particular app. And then, the registry also instantiates and assigns permissions for the repo app. The repo app is where the code lives itself, and a dev can either interact with the registry itself and create a new instance, or through the CLI deploy a new instance of a DAO. Any questions?
Yeah. When I'm a developer of application and I want to upgrade this app, I have to tell everybody that app have a new version. And then they have to upgrade their applications by this information.
Yes.
Okay, by IPFS hash and address of.
And when I go into the CLI, there's a command, where you type Aragon APM versions, and then you can see for that name hash all the different versions that exist for that application.
Publish it in smart contract by a list of versions.
Exactly.
And IPFS have ID and sources and what IPFS store for applications, Aragon applications.
I don't know if I understand your question.
I
think you want to ask how do you use IPFS in this case
Okay. So the IPFS hash has this JSON file, this data, this metadata about the contract for the versioning system. So it even has a link for what the previous version is, and I'll go into that.
There is no API's source code in IPFS.
There's no source code on IPFS, correct? No. There's no direct, there's no like compiled, source code on IPFS. No. There's just like the address of that particular repository which has that code.
What about API?
I'm sorry?
API.
That's a good question. I don't know if the ABI is, I don't believe so. I want to say no, the ABI is not uploaded to IPFS. I don't think so, no.
Where does user interface is stored?
That is stored on IPFS, actually. There's a
Front end is stored.
you actually publish your front end when you publish your contract.
Is a new version.
Yeah. Cool. So this is like super straightforward and kind of redundant. If you guys know versioning, I'm just gonna go over how versioning works. So every individual repo is an Aragon app that leverages the ACL and the Aragon PM DAO. After it checks, the repo logic checks whether or not the upgrade version is allowed. A version bump for a package is defined with the following rules. So you can only increase by 1 every time you run the command. The version components to the left of the raised member must stay the same, and the components to the right must be 0. So obviously, if you do major, the first one gets bumped. If you do minor, the second one gets bumped. If you do patch, the last number in this gets bumped. And so the initial, we start at 0.0, right? Cool. This is gonna make more sense when we actually start to dev, but here are the main commands that we'll be using today. And I wish I planned this a little bit better so I could share this slide with you guys, these slides, just because I have all the sources that you could click through. So for publishing, you just run Aragon publish major. So like I said, there's semantic versioning, so you can either specify, I'm trying to bump from X to Y, or I can say it's a major publish, it's a minor publish, it's a patch. And when you access CLI commands, it uses that same semantic versioning. Aragon run, so this is how you essentially spin up both your contract code and your front end into a bundle. And then Aragon dev chain is the local chain that uses Ganache, but it has some contracts pre-deployed. So it has the core Aragon apps already deployed, and it has the registry deployed for you. So when you're deving, you're technically just publishing to your dev chain. And then Aragon IPFS is a wrapped version of IPFS. I think it's Go IPFS version 6 is the one that we use as a standard. And both those commands need to be run prior to running, Aragon publish or Aragon run to get, your IPFS node going and to get Ganache going. You can run your own. I think I'll talk about that later. But cool. So when we go through the template, you'll see this. arapp.json. This is where your configuration rules live. So this is where you, in this JSON file, you put, okay, here are all the roles inside of my application, and here are the environments for my application. So you can even specify different registries for whether or not you're deploying to Rinkeby or to Kovan or on your local chain. And yeah, all of that goes in there. You can use your own IPFS node, but then you have to redeploy all those contracts and propagate all those CIDs to IPFS. So it's recommended that you just use the IPFS that's bundled inside of the CLI, but you can set up your own WebSocket with your own node if you wanted to. Cool. So back to your point about how do you know what versions there are, this is how you would do it. So basically, you could go Aragon APM packages, it defaults to Aragon PM.eth, and it'll show you all the different packages and the latest versions that exist for each of those packages. So it'll say, voting 3.0, and we can go through that. And then kind of in the slide before, this is how you bump a major version. It's very straightforward. Cool. So DAO commands. If you want to just spin up a new Aragon DAO with the default template, I won't go too much into templates, but essentially templates is a smart contract that configures the permissions and installs apps into your Aragon DAO when you want to launch a new one. So right now, if you do Aragon DAO new, it uses this base template, which basically gives you access to the voting app, the token manager. I think maybe finance app is now part of the base. I'm not too sure. And the vault, which is essentially a multi-sig. And so those kind of come out of the box for you. Your app is pre-installed with those things and has all the correct permissions configured for you. And yeah.
What is the private case for executing the transactions story?
Can you just repeat the question? I'm sorry.
There is a transactions in Ethereum chain about ACL, grant.
Yeah, those create transactions. Yeah, so Aragon DAO new would create a transaction that.
But not executing.
No, it does. It does execute. Yeah.
By what private key?
Yeah. So there are. This would execute not on like mainnet and whatnot. Yeah, you would need to actually have you would have to configure the CLI with the environment and make sure you have an address with some ETH on it. But for this, since it wraps Ganache, you get 10 addresses with some ETH preloaded in there, and it'll sign all these transactions and do all that work. And that's why I should have shared this with you guys, because if you go here, it shows you all the different parameters if you want to change your environment or pass in, all this other stuff. And like I said, we won't use the ACL commands, but so you can debug your apps. You can actually grant and revoke permissions directly from the command line interface. So let's say you're working on your template and something's not working and it's hitting a revert or something like that, you can just supply, you basically supply the app proxy and the registry and the name of the role and then the name of the app. And you're able to grant and revoke permissions, given the fact that that first address or that default address set has the app manager role. If you've revoked that role from the root, then obviously you can't run this, or it won't let you. Cool.
Question: could the organization work without root role assigned?
So yes, it can work once it's deployed, but you do need that root role to configure the DAO. And
if you revoke this permission after?
Yeah, so that's a very common pattern. Like that's why you have the DAO template, because what the DAO template will do is it'll create that root contract, configure all the different roles, and then at the end it'll revoke itself from having that permission. So then it's kind of like locked in now. Cool. Awesome. I'm gonna briefly touch on this, but for the rest, I'm just when we go more in depth, I'm just gonna go through the demo. But the Aragon API is just an abstraction layer on top of Web3.js, so you don't need to bring that in. You can just use Aragon API to make your calls to Ethereum. This is where you get access to your application state. So the Aragon API actually caches your state of your contract for you. If you document your code correctly, you have access to RadSpec, which is a way for human readable transactions. This is really nice because you can have like a nice prompt before something happens, just so it's not just a bunch of form fields where someone puts in their data and then they don't know what's going on. RadSpec essentially gives you the human readable version of what that transaction is going to do. And then the background script is essentially how you're going to consume events from the Aragon API wrapper and reduce your state for your UI. So very common concept in React. Sometimes you have pure components, sometimes you have stateful components. Sometimes that state is like nested very deep into your DOM tree. The background script allows you to, write a reducer and manipulate that state and ensure that when that new state update happens, that there's no side effects because the state is immutable, right? Cool. And so, yeah, at a high level, you have this wrapper, which will wrap your whole app in, this Aragon API. And then inside of your app, you have access to an API object and an app state object through the hooks API with this function, use Aragon API. So now you have an RPC to send messages to your application from your contract. And so if we were to back up actually a little bit, so we have this function set receiver. And let's say when I deployed my DAO for my provider, let's say my provider's MetaMask, right? That address, your default address there, has that set receiver role. Now, let's say I have a button somewhere and I want to call that function. All I would write was api.call, the name of that function. And just right here, if we just end that right here, what you're going to get in return is an observable. And so you have to handle that. You can either, if you don't care about what happens, you just write toPromise, and when the promise resolves, you'll get the value, the return value of that observable. And otherwise, you can actually, inside toPromise, right, do some error handling or return, or format the values, or do whatever logic that needs to be done based on different types of return values that you may get from your function. So, yeah, this is sort of at a very high level what API does. And then API.events sets up a subscription to all of the events inside your contract. And that's going to be used in the background script to reduce the state. And this will make a lot more sense when we kind of step through all the files and, yeah, we take a look at everything. And like I said before, you don't have to use this React wrapper. There's a standard wrapper in JavaScript. I'm not going to go over it here because I'm going to be using this template to kind of get everybody started. But if you're not a React person, you can have access to this pipeline through JavaScript still. Cool. And then, yeah, this is the last thing. So I've talked about it briefly. We have a design kit. There you go. This is how you install it. We have a main higher order component that defines all the base styles that then can be accessed throughout your app. The only real interesting command here is this copy Aragon UI assets to public. So basically, you make a copy of those components. I believe they're minified, and then it goes inside your application directory for your distribution. And yeah, when we run the template, you'll see kind of in the package.json like the order of the events for when these things get called. And so great. Let's do some stuff with. Remind me later. Great. All right. Is this good for people? Can you guys see? Let me zoom in more. Awesome. So, yeah, so to start, so first, let's get everybody's environment set up. Here, so first you're gonna have to run npm I. I'm not going to do this, but Aragon CLI. Make sure you, and -G, make sure that's installed globally. You need to have, and here, I'm gonna actually guide everyone to, we're gonna do this together now. So, yeah, we're gonna make sure that you have the CLI installed. And yeah, once that's done, we're gonna install IPFS, and I can just like walk around with people here, but if I wish there was an easier way to share this, but if you go to hack.aragon.org/docs/CLI-intro, it's gonna walk you through how to install all the CLI commands. But like I said, I can walk you guys through that. But cool. So, all right. Let me call this. So all this command is doing is it's saying, we have a script here to build a boilerplate app. This is the name of your boilerplate app. So this will be the folder where it lives. And we're just going to use the React template, just so that we don't have to really go through all of the examples that are on the site. It has it all for you. But this will create a project for you. So yeah, while this does its thing, does anyone have any questions? Very fun stuff, I know. I also have one ready. So, I mean, I'm not actually going to do this. But
where can I find this code? Inside?
yeah, so go to hack.aragon.org.
How is that?
Out here. And I'll show you. Yeah, this one. So yeah, your app name, and then you're going to do React here. So,
React, yeah.
Cool. So before we go into the contracts, I just want to actually let's do the contract first, and then let's talk about the Era app JSON file. So first, here's the template that I was mentioning earlier. So this is essentially how you're going to deploy your Aragon application. So when everything gets installed, maybe I should. Oh, interesting. Okay. Weird. Sorry, guys. It's a little big, but okay, that's a little better. So yeah, so here we're gonna get ENS, which is how we're gonna resolve our names inside the registry. The DAO factory, which is actually what makes the Aragon DAO. And as you can see in this constructor, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, if we don't have a factory or we don't have an address already that knows what kind of kit we want to deploy, get the kit from APM. And so as you can see here, you can get a factory from that bare kit, which has, I think, like I said, voting, token manager, the vault. And then this is essentially how you configure it. So like I said before, I said address 0, I meant to say -1, but if you want to have a contract set up a role for a contract so that any contract address sets it, you set this to -1. But in here, and I really wish this doesn't look so bad. Okay. So yeah, this is sort of what we're doing here. Where do I start here? All right. So as you can see at the top here, we actually bring in the Aragon apps. So this is how you essentially get the version, like the latest version of the contract code itself. So you bring these in, right? And then here, what you're doing is you're actually using APM to get that contract data. And as you can see here, you're creating a new app instance with the voting ID with the latest version of the contract. And so, this comes out of the box with voting and token manager. We have a convention to use safe ERC and then wrap a safe ERC20 token with this thing called a mini-me token. These are the only ERC20 tokens that an Aragon DAO is allowed to be managed by the token manager. So yeah, that's what this is. This is code essentially is creating us an app token. The parameters for this can specify how much get minted. It's not that important. I'm just showing you that you're configuring all these different apps. And then down here, when the app is initialized, you can actually initialize your other apps. So, we're going to supply the token for the voting address. We're going to supply what the quorum rules are. And here you'll see we're granting permission. So the first thing, right, is we're going to give the root token permission to mint tokens, because the token manager is, when you supply a mini-me token to the token manager, you can no longer use the ERC20 mint method. You have to use the token manager's mint role. And yeah, now we're gonna set up all our permissions. So we're basically saying, okay, for our voting app and for the voting creates voting role, there are many other roles that's in the documentation. We're going to say any entity, so anyone can create a vote. If we look at the app, the very silly app that this comes with, which is a counter, very exciting stuff. So yeah, this is a very small Aragon app, right? We have a counter, one method increments it, one method decrements it, right? We have two roles here, right? And look, you can make it so that maybe only the voting app is allowed to increment, but any entity can decrement a counter. And so you're actually kind of going through all your different roles that you set up in your contract and setting who has permission to do what. And this is the base of how you're going to deploy your DAO through a template. Yeah.
The template contract, a new instance, is this factually to build a new instance of app or DAO?
So an app is a DAO. Like every app is a DAO, including the PM, Aragon PM is a DAO. But maybe I didn't miss it. Maybe I'm not getting.
It's DAO organization or DAO app?
Yeah, so organization, yeah. So this is how you would, yeah, exactly. But every DAO is an app, so like you can have an app that loads other apps, and then that could be one app. Does it make sense? So I could have an app with like a bunch of different Aragon apps pre-installed, and then that whole app is an app. It's a little tricky. But yeah, back to your point when you were like, hey, do we need this app manager role? As you can see, you're revoking that permission from this contract, like when it's done configuring. Cool. So this is the template. Now, let's look at the Aragon app JSON file. So here, you have to define all your roles.
I have a question about the token factory, and it's could be mini token or simple way ERC20. So both will working or just mini?
It's just mini-me tokens. The reason for that has to do with configuring the permissions of minting, and when you use the token manager to mint these tokens. But I don't think there's a necessarily like hard technical challenge that's preventing support from regular ERC20. It's just to allow the roles to be exposed in the way that the other Aragon apps are exposed. So yeah, we can increment the counter. And as you can see, a lot of this is like very redundant. I know that you have to type, oh, here are the names of my permissions in my app. Here are the name of my permissions in the file. But this manifest essentially is what gets published to Aragon PM. So this is how other apps know how to talk to your app. And so yeah, here you can set up your different environments. And yeah, it shows you if you want to use a different WebSocket, your different networks. And then yeah, you supply the path of like where your app is, right, in this bundle. Real exciting stuff. I know it's redundant, but like I said, this is what gets published, and this is how other apps know. And this is also how you configure your own app for particular environments and setting the registries. And lastly, not too exciting, but every app has a manifest JSON file. This is really common in a lot of web apps. This is essentially for like how Google and other search engines, it makes it easier to crawl your app and to get that data, for search. Cool.
Is there any check in registry for this your DAO application is correct and have no hacks?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So there is no checks other than kind of the hard check of when you want to publish to the main package manager repository. So the registry that exists on the dev chain, it doesn't check at all. You can publish to that freely. That's yours to play with. But if you wanted to like go live or publish your contract to Rinkeby, there's actually a process which is in the docs where you can reach out to the team and they kind of, it's not really an audit, but they will approve or not approve your ability to publish to the main packages, and then it'll show up in the list of apps that you can install when you spin up the app. So we're going to do that right now, actually, and you'll see what I mean. So cool. Let's look at the package.json file. Sorry if this is getting messy. Okay. Awesome. Also, does everybody that's trying to follow along run the command and are everything go well? Shit doesn't. It's going. It's good. It's good. Okay. Is everybody good? Okay. Cool. All right. So, like I said, first thing we need to do is this, and we also. I know, I don't use tmux, I know. So, yeah. Yeah, so first, in one window, I have Aragon dev chain. In the other window, I got Aragon IPFS running. So we're going to wait for these things to start up. Sorry. Oh yeah, sorry. This is really small. Yeah, so Aragon dev chain to start your local Ganache environment, and Aragon IPFS to start your own IPFS environment.
If I have an IPFS instance, Go IPFS instance, I don't have to run IPFS command, right?
Yeah, so if you have you can run your own IPFS instance, but you have to then propagate all the content.
What?
You'd have to propagate all the content that exists in the wrapped IPFS instance that Aragon comes with. So you can run your own instance, you can run your own version IPFS, but you have to then configure it and like redeploy all that data for all those apps that are on the registry. You have to propagate, I believe. So it's best to run, and then I think I have it here, but if you run, Aragon IP, after the CLI installs, you can run Aragon IPFS install and then Aragon dev chain install. Or I think that actually the dev chain comes out of the box for you. But yeah, this is going very fast. I know. So in the meantime, I'm going to charge my laptop. Is anyone running into issues installing the CLI? Does anyone need help? No? Yeah. Yeah, the templates themselves are like a lot. And I can actually show you guys, and I can send, if anyone's interested, the repo of a bunch of different DAO templates. So we only talked about the Bear template because that's what we're using in the React boilerplate that's given, but there are other templates for like if you want to make a democracy or if you want to set up a multi-sig wallet. Like I can send those way to anyone that wants to see the code on GitHub. So cool, this finally happened. So as you can see, you're given an address, root, right, that can deploy DAOs. So this address is what has that app manager role, like out of the box. And it shows you where ENS is deployed. So this is where your registry is. And yeah, this is the WebSocket, right, with our chain going. And IPFS. Cool, we're good. So yeah, the daemon's now running. All right, awesome. Yeah, sure.
Maybe if I hold the wrong one.
Server mainnet listen.
It's already.
Yeah, it's already in use. So here, I got you. Or if you want, I didn't mean to hijack. ls of -i. What, 8080, right? Yeah, you're gonna have to kill these. Yeah. Yeah, you get, I think it defaults to 8080 for, yeah, it's 8080 for IPFS, and then it's 8545 for the dev chain. Those two ports have to be open. So kill those processes. Awesome. So I'm going to run the command, npm run start, but let's unpack that command. So it runs start IPFS. Okay, we go here, bang. What's start IPFS? Okay, we're going to, after the project is compiled, we're going to run the distribution file. And then we're going to start an HTTP server and then serve our distribution. So this is all the things that the CLI handles for you. This is how you actually run the template. So as you can see here, we're specifying the template that we're using, and where this is a default environment variable, but this is the ENS address of where that bear kit exists, and it defaults to open.aragon pm.eth. So yeah, let's let's, oh, oops. Okay. So yeah, as you can see, it checks to make sure that IPFS is started. Okay, it's adding local files. So like the first thing it's going to do is compile all the contracts. I know, very fast.
It's deploying smart contracts and dev chain.
Yeah, and yeah, it's gonna apply a version bump if it needs to. For the first time, it bumps a major version, right? Subsequent times, it's just going to check to see if it's not 0 and then use that version. If you wanted the meat and potatoes, they use Parcel to do the front end wrapping. We don't, I have no real strong opinions. I like Parcel. It's really easy to use. Some people like Webpack. I don't know if there's any plans to support Webpack for the platform, but yeah, this is what we use to build our front ends. Cool, so as you can see, it's fetching the template, right? It did really fast, but as you can see, it was fetching the template using that ENS domain. And now it's going to run that template and configure our roles. It's not working for you? Oh, you're good, okay. Yeah, this is the best part. Yeah, does anyone have any questions about Aragon? Criticisms?
I have a question. There is a web UI. It's, for instance, linkedin.aragon.org.
Yeah.
And if I want to launch this interface for my home, for private network, what should I do? Just is it public UI? I can deploy on my
Yeah. So yeah. We are good to go. So as you can see, when this runs, it tells us all the good stuff. So it tells us where our DAO is deployed. And this is cool because let's say after I ran this template and stuff, I wanted to use the CLI to install new apps. I could just now use this address because it's deployed to our dev chain. And beautiful, we're here. So, okay, I can't perform this action, obviously. Here, let's... Yeah, so this is a little bit of a challenge. So here, you can use MetaMask as your provider, but it's suggested that you use Frame. It's a little bit easier, but yeah. exactly. And I don't have it. Like this one doesn't have an ETH.
Find it something repository or where is that?
Yeah. This is my favorite part.
Mnemonic published locked out
Oh,
the console when you run Aragon DappCon.
oh yeah, use this one then. Yeah. So then I can do this. Oh, I sign out of this account. Import seed phrase. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, blah, blah, blah. All right, boom. So this is where the rad spec stuff I was talking about comes in. So if we, let me do this. I don't know why I did this, but sorry. Yeah, so if I wanted to, so yeah, this is what's pretty cool about rad spec. Like, I'm going to increment the counter by step, and you use this notation, you set your parameter, right, step, and it'll know now. So like if you look at here, because that's, you know, oh yeah, and then we didn't actually look at this, but, oops. And over here, so look, we brought in the app state and the API, right, using this use Aragon API, and we wrapped our app in that high-level wrapper that I was talking about. And we pass in our parameter right here. So that's how it knows what's happening. Beautiful. So we create this transaction.
Which account should I use to create this transaction?
Use the one that's generated by the dev chain. Yeah, import that seed phrase into MetaMask, and then you can just each there's like 10 addresses with like 100 ETH in it. So boom. Okay, we get a little notification, which is pretty nice. It's confirmed. It updates, and that's because, as you can see, we have our reducer over here, right? It says, okay, if our state is null, which it will be in the beginning, right? This is the base object that we're going to use to represent our state, and then in here, script. We have the juicy stuff over here. So this is where we would reduce our state. So we have a store, right? Well, first we bring in the API, right? And then over here, we're able to, based on the events that we defined, which get emitted, right? These are the same, increment, increment, you can update the count. And yeah, this one, if those are familiar with RxJS, of is just saying when we get that object of all our states, we're only looking for the one event over here. So we're always going to initialize this event at the start of the store. So always do this, right? But as you can see, we can have, when we get this event, this is what we want to do to our app. We want to call value. So we want to look at, so think of it this way. So what this is saying is you increment the role, right? So it goes from 0 to 1, but you don't know, you don't actually want to update your app state, right? Based on that action. We would rather wait for the contract to update and then display that action. So that's essentially what's happening here. So value is a public method, right? And so all you need to do is call api.call value, right, to promise. We don't care about the result of this. We know that it's going to return, right, an int. And yeah, you update the count. So it's doing this every single time. Do it on initialization, right? Do it when we increment, do it when we decrement. And then in the app itself, right, the API actually knows what this function's name. And so look, you can actually just call this function. So everything is really, it's nice because the flow of all your events and what you write in your contract is semantically linked to what you're going to write in your front end. Yeah, it might be a little bit tedious, let's just say, to always update, to make sure that you update everything. So to make sure that you update the contract, the template, the Era app JSON, and make sure all that is published. So every single time you make an update, you should republish. Especially if your template is pulling down your contract. If you create a template where you're going to, after the initial publish, you're going to pull down from the APM. So you have to make sure to do that each time. Cool. Did everyone get their stuff working? Are we good? Awesome. Cool. So I guess let's play with this a little bit and do something not basic, or maybe also basic, but a little bit more fun. So I titled this talk, How to Build Adaptive DAOs, and the best way I could describe it is it's not anything, fancy in the sense of I'm going to show you some super cool trick that's unique to the that I have found out after all this deving on the platform. I'm just going to kind of talk about the philosophy for designing an app and how to not kind of work yourself into a hole, because sometimes when you see this, your immediate impression might be, okay, I have these different roles, and I'm going to create a role for every action that my app can do. And that is a really good approach to start, but if you want to have flexibility, it can be a little bit difficult later, because unless you're using a forwarder, so unless you're actually forwarding, you're not actually calling those functions within a contract, but you're running an EVM script to then call those functions. Setting up the permission to who's allowed to run the EVM script can get really hairy really fast, because if you're going to have to write a different EVM script for every different function, right? So you're not really going to be reusing roles. You're going to be setting up new roles every time. So it's a little bit hairy. So what I suggest is try to think of your app as or try to think of every app as adding something that none of the previous apps do. So if you find yourself writing a function or a method in one of your apps that just calls another function in another app, you're not thinking about it correctly. You should instead try to think about it, what is the unique thing that this can do? What's the unique piece of work that this app is trying to accomplish? And everything else, every other type of work, I'm just going to use the forwarder API on my client. So in the client, you'll actually be using Web3 to encode the function calls with the parameters, and then forwarding those actions through the API. You guys. So instead of trying to do it all inside of the contract, take some of that logic, put it into your client, and bring in those other contracts and observe those other contract events. Make your calls there. Don't make all your calls inside of your contract. These contracts should do very discrete things for a very discrete state. Those states should generally not depend on the states of other apps in the ecosystem. So yeah, let's see, is there anything, let's try to build something cool. So, I don't know, is there anything that you guys want to see happen? Is there anything? No? I need ideas.
I just made the multiplayer for 2 and...
Oh, yeah. Beautiful, yes, more math. No, I'm trying to think of oh, you know what, I'll actually show you guys one more thing before, I guess, I can walk around and help people, or if people want to try their own ideas and it's not working, we can try to figure out why it's not working. But I just want to show you guys some of the meat and potatoes of this. So you were asking about that registry that's public, right, on mainnet or on RankB. So when it's approved to be published, it shows up in this App Center. So you can actually, so right now, Survey app is ready, Agent is working. I don't think these are published. Yeah, I don't think any of Planning Suite, Payroll's ready to go, Pando, I know it's not, and Liquid Democracy is not ready to go. But once those apps are published, you can browse them here. And part of that manifest JSON that I was talking about, this is where it's getting all this information. So when you propagate that content, this is the type of content that you're propagating. And if we were to install an app here, yeah, this is where it shows up. And if you need to, clear your cache, it's in the settings. It'll show you all the addresses of the different apps installed, right? This is good for debugging, but let's try to do, let's try to do this. We're going to, and then, yeah, so, yeah, so let's do Vault. So yeah, now that you have so now that this is run, you should be able to install an app. So you can do Aragon DAO install, and then boom, oops. And we can do Vault, open Aragon pm.eth. I'm sorry?
You're installing application to the marketplace, the chain.
So yeah, essentially what I'm doing here is, okay, we deployed this DAO at this address, and what I want to do now is install an existing application that's on the marketplace to that DAO. So instead of setting up a template, and inside that template, getting that contract, I just want to use the CLI. So I'm just demonstrating that, yeah, if you don't want to use the templating version, like, one, because like, let's say you're installing like a bunch of apps, you know, the stack is going to get too deep, right, on the function calls, and it's kind of an issue. So I'm just showing that like, once things are published to the package manager, you're able to leverage that to install applications to your DAO. So you don't have to use that template contract every single time.
Okay, where is the names of those applications?
Yeah, so if you go to, I think it's Aragon. They have a registry somewhere, but I don't know where. Where is their app? Man. Yeah, so another thing you can run is this. Oh yeah, sorry. Oh yeah. We're gonna get all the apps. Oh, APM packages. And then, yeah. Yeah, so now it's gonna gather all the repos inside the registry, and it's going to, show us the version. So this is where you would find out, like, okay, what apps do I have access to, basically, and then boom. So here are the ones that, here are the ones that are launched. And now I think this is taking so long. Yeah, so I guess I can talk about some challenges too about the platform. So this is really awesome that you're able to do this. I mean, I think so. I think it's really sick that there's like a package manager for smart contracts, but there is a size problem. So we are running into issues scaling. As you can imagine, these blobs will get very large as they stay linked together. And that's a big reason why this takes a very long time. One, because, not all the time does IPFS work, but mainly because, the size of these blobs are getting bigger and bigger as each version gets bumped, right, and as they're linked, right? So this is good for right now, but I know that the core team, Aragon 1, is looking into solutions for scaling the package manager so that, anyone, kind of like NPM, where you can just publish your package, the part of the reason why we're not allowing that ability for mainnet is because otherwise it'll just get clogged and then, it'll never work.
Where can I find the descriptions of this application?
Sorry?
Read me like every.
Yeah, so there are. This is where they are going to publish all of their official released apps.
Okay, but if someone published the package, how I could find the repository of any application in APM ring?
Yeah. in the okay, in the in that manifest, you can specify a Git repo, so you could you would be able to expose it there. Is your question if someone publishes something on their own chain, or is your question if they publish it to like mainnet or Rinkeby or something like that? Yeah. Okay. So each instance of the registries are unique, right? So your local instance of the registry will right now mirror these core apps because that's what's coming out of the box with the CLI and the installation. But you're right. It won't have, for example, your app if you decide to publish it. It wouldn't come with that. You would have to republish those packages to your local chain.
I just want to see the repository of each of those applications.
I want to see the.
This is a list of applications. And
Yeah.
I want to see the repository of each application.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's no easy way, to see the Git repos. I mean, there's like the repository, like the repo that has the version of the code, but it doesn't. Yeah, there's no way to like expose that, right? To like see the README. So that's why I was kind of just pointing you in this direction. Here are the main apps. In these apps, these are what's currently in the registry, and then I mean, I don't actually think they have a README file here, but this is where you would go if you wanted to audit.
Maybe you should make this like in Imperium when you have a package Json with
Yeah.
repository.
100%. Yeah. So Aragon Black is another team in the ecosystem, and they are working on a package, like a full package manager site where you can go, exactly what you're saying, see the Git repository, see the latest version, see who are the authors, I think that's like super needed tool because right now it's very, obfuscated away. Like you kind of have to know, this is where to look, but I do agree. Yeah, we need to find a better way to expose like the repositories themselves, like wherever they're published, so people can track their development and track the version updates when they happen, so they don't always have to run, Aragon APM version this, ETH domain, Cool. So we have 30 minutes left. My plan was to just walk around and help people with installation stuff. I don't really have much left other than to take more questions and.
For instance, if we have a counter, can we update it to make it mint tokens, RC mini tokens?
Yeah.
What should I do if I want to add this functionality?
Yeah. There's a couple ways here. So the first way that I would suggest is don't make that call inside of the contract. So instead of doing something like this, where, okay, whatever, I don't think this is going to compile because I don't know if I have this, or no. It's going to be something like this. Right. And so one way, right, is to do something like this, right? Where, okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to say, okay, when we right, and then we're going to say right? And I'm going to say And then let's say, okay, let's just say we did it in an increment, right? Then we can say, oh, first, I actually don't want to do that. I want to say, yeah, no, that's fine. I'm going to say over here, right? Let's say step, right? Let me just double check this API is what I think it is. And it's not really going to work because we also needed to go in here, and we're going to have to give the app the permission to mint tokens. So what we're going to do is we're going to say right? And then the manager is, this. No. Yeah, it's this. So what this function, okay, so to go into this function, what it's saying is, this is who you grant. This is the address of the contract you want to grant the permission to. That creates the permission, actually, not grant, creates the permission. This is the contract with the token, with the app manager that has the role. You specify the role here, and then, no, I'm sorry. This is the app you want to target with roles. This is the specific role, and then this is the app manager. The last one is the app manager. Here, we may not want to do this. Maybe instead what we do is we do this. So instead of creating a new permission, you would just do this. You would just grant permission here.
What's the difference?
The difference is when you create a permission, it's like creating the role for that particular app manager for that app. So we already did that once here, and this contract already is the app manager, right? Like this template contract is the app manager for our counter app, and so I can technically just grant my app permission, but I think it's actually redundant because once it creates this role, like I actually don't think you need this. Actually, now that I think about this, you don't need this at all. Actually, this should be fine. This should work because you've created since the app. Oh no, I take it back. You do need it. Never mind. This is this. Yeah. So the template app is creating the permission, but the app itself needs to have permission to mint. So that's the difference. So, because at the end here, right, we're going to revoke the template from being able to create permissions, but it will still, and from being the app manager, but it will still be able to mint tokens. So I could technically still mint tokens from this contract. So yeah, that's what's going on right here, right? So you might be thinking, oh, this should work. And I think it does work. It might work. But I don't think it's going to work. And Aragon, APM, publish, minor. So the reason why I don't think it's going to work is because technically speaking, that app is trying to perform an action in another app, and they're sandboxed, right? So I've granted permission for it to perform this action, but the I think the app manager itself is going to prevent me from making that call. That's why I was suggesting before, the best way to mint a token in that case would be to say, to give a particular provider, so give a particular address. So like, let's say, okay, the app is deployed, and then you say, okay, this address can mint a token. So the address that's in MetaMask, and then from there, do an ABI encode packed call to that contract, because now that the access role lists aren't shared. There's not a role in the counter app that's the same as that's pointing to the role in the token manager, because they have two separate lists, right? So now you're just so that's because technically, right, the person that has, because think about it this way, the person that has the increment role then is not the same role as the minting role. And in that function, that's what that's implying. So it's going to yell at me. But that was part of the idea of the talk, was to kind of just push to get the information out there that ideally speaking, you should be able to, you should try to be able to call these contracts and set up these roles completely isolated, and try not to be calling other methods and other apps when you have a role defined, because it doesn't make much sense, right? So anyway, let's just see if it runs or not runs. Well, let's see the tests here. Oh yeah, maybe I can talk about this a little bit, because it's actually pretty cool. So the testing framework is just like Ganache, and this is really encouraged to write tests for your apps, because I think we're gonna see right now it fail. So but just to step through this. So just to unfold it, in the test, you actually go through all the steps that your template does. So another kind of rough point, just because you wrote your template doesn't mean that it's synced up with your tests. So everything that you did in your template to configure your app, you have to do in your tests. So this is because it's like creating a new instance of your DAO.
Is this template only for development purpose, or?
So the template is actually for deployment. For deployment, yeah. I'm sorry?
Is it like a factory?
Exactly. It's like a it's like I said, it's like a factory, but then it also allows you to configure your permissions in a smart contract. And that's what's kind of annoying here, right? Is that in the tests, we have to do all that work again. But if we kind of just step through it, and we look at the template itself, they're doing basically the same thing. We are getting these apps, from the PM, right? And we're initializing them, and then we're setting up their permissions, and that's exactly what's happening here.
So new instance used for new and upgrades for application.
New instance for new.
For creating and upgrading the application.
Yeah. Yeah.
Question. In App Center, if I click install the app, which transaction is called in this case? Now there is no install button, but if there will be some.
Yeah.
Which transaction, which method is called?
Yeah. So that's where it gets interesting, right? Because you would have to redeploy the whole DAO, and that's what the app proxy is for, right? Because we have the proxy app for our own app that points to these other packages. So you can't really do that button and then visit the DAO at the same address because you'd get a new address.
So each time I install a new app, I got a new DAO address?
I'm saying I thought you meant when you upgraded, or, oh, okay, sorry, I understand your question. Your question is, I have an app installed, I want to have a button like in that explore apps thing that hits install for each of those apps. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so you would have to bump the version, right, when you installed that new app. So there would just be some work there probably just have to be some work to upgrade that version, and then there has to be a way to point the current address that it's currently deployed to that new version, and I'm not too sure if there's a succinct way to do that. But I could be wrong. I mean, if that's something that you definitely want an answer to, I can ask some of the core devs. Yeah.
I have an issue.
Sure.
With my application after upgrade. I made publish minor, and then there is an app.
Ah, yes. Don't. I love it. No app by that name. So, let's see. Oh, nice. You got to see more over here. You got to propagate the content.
Oh.
Yeah, it's as you can see, there's like a lot of redundant steps you have to do, but it's still pretty cool. Yeah, we got 15 minutes left, guys, and I don't have much for you. Anything? Concerns?
How will you succeed with this test, or should we install it work to run it?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We were in the middle of doing something. I didn't do this. But yeah, sorry. Yeah, so right now, the limiting factor is the CLI. And it has to be 0.4.24. It doesn't support, not all of the OS contracts support version 5 or 0.5. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Request and last step and same mirror.
Can we see? Okay, this is going. Your daemon's going. Yeah, something's.
Maybe restart something, I don't know.
Let's see. Let's look at what we got here. Okay. Maybe try killing
Maybe.
and then restarting this.
Yeah.
But why isn't it? Hold on. Did it give you API ID though? Transaction apps. Oh, it doesn't print you the CID, huh? Oh, no, it has it here. All right, let's see if it's here. Here, see if this loads for you.
I tried it, but
No.
Don't know what is it. What I'm gonna do.
Type directory. Yeah, so it has the code artifact. Oh, so actually back to your question about where the ABI is. The ABI does actually get put into the...
Artifact.
So, yeah, this is weird. Okay, so we know it's there, though.
It is wrong repository.
Oh, yeah. And what did you change, just so I can take a look?
It's just a multiplier.
Beautiful.
There is a new version in interface, but it's not working. It's strange.
Let's just see if you. Well, let's see if you can do a major bump, and see if it propagates. Oh yeah. Also, with this, back to that example. So, one the issue was I didn't do this. You know, like I changed the initialization, right? And I need to pass it in now. This is another fun thing. So, even when you do this, though, when you use Aragon run, you still need to supply the address as part of the initialization as like an initialization parameter. So often with this, there will be a deploy script. So this is not in the template that I just showed you, because in this template, or in this React boilerplate, there was no need for it. But a common thing to do would be to create a deploy script that does exactly what, kind of like I was showing you in Ganache, it does the same thing. And you would pipe the output of that into Aragon run, right? So you would pipe that array of addresses. So after you deploy them, you get the address, and then in Aragon run, you do -- I think app init args or something, and then pipe the output of your deploy script with those addresses, because it calls initialize when Aragon run is executed. But we have an issue here.
Since there is different compiler version.
Oh yeah?
I have the same, I have 0.5.
You can just grab the error and see the whole error.
Syntax error.
Different compiler version.
Oh, but that's weird. Oh. Ah. How do I change my version over here? Does anyone know actually this? Does anyone know how to change Silksy version? In
I think it would talk alone.
yeah, because then you have to re-download it or whatever. Okay. Yeah.
And if I have a question later, what is the best place to ask them?
So there is the forum. So we have Aragon. So there's the chat. So Aragon.chat over here. There's dev and dev help. People are very, very responsive. The team is super responsive. They'll answer everything from like the contracts themselves if you're having issues to if you're having environment issues. Super, super helpful place.
Which channel is better to use?
Dev and dev help are yeah. And then we have the forum. So forum.aragon.org. I don't see dev questions posted here often. This is like more of like a community place, but I'm sure if you like posted a question here, people would respond for sure. Yeah, let's see what your.
But there is a set state request. I don't know.
Dude, what is going on? What's strange is like this link is working, right? But then.
Maybe I should create an issue in some repository about that.
Yeah, I mean, what the fuck? All right, publishes, get the transaction. Okay, let's, but does this work for you now? Sorry, let me just.
It's already started.
Oh, it is already started?
In some of tabs. Maybe in first tab.
Yeah, so we'll just close this actually, because you probably need to restart this.
Maybe, yeah.
Because it's going to recompile the contract and then serve a new distribution with your code.
It's a problem. Yeah.
That might have been the problem, because then it was what you propagated on IPFS was different than what the app was trying to run. Cool. All right, guys. I don't have much for you. Anything?
What is the roadmap for agent application map?
That's a very good question. I am not looped into like what the development roadmap is for that, but I do know that it can be used, and it's like in a state where it can be used.
Yeah, we actually deployed it in the parallel stage. We managed to kind of make interactions with different applications. With dApps like compounded Uniswap, but it was still kind of a bit buggy.
I know the ABI v2 encoder is not fully supported, I don't think. Yeah,
So